Okay, this is the final instructor-produced video for Module 1, and it's titled The Great Religions. You have all these materials, so I won't be real long here. There's just a few things that you may not pick up in the readings that I'd like to cover. Now, once again, we're finishing up the introduction to the course, and with Module 2, we'll be moving on to Hinduism, the first religion that we'll be reviewing. Okay, well, if you look at this, the first slide I have up here, the great religions, the first point I'd like to make is that these religions, of course, aren't considered to be any more correct or any more elaborate or complex than all the other religions of the world. They're designated great or sometimes world religions simply for cultural reasons, demographic reasons, and historical reasons. In other words, these religions are important either culturally, historically, or they're just very large, and so therefore we give them the special designation of the great religions. They're commonly agreed to be 11 of them. Some people add Baha'i, but I prefer to keep the list right here at 11. And it breaks down pretty nicely into Western and Eastern religions. For the Western religions, we have the so-called big three Western monotheisms: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then we have a religion that was prominent historically. In fact, it was the religion of the Persian Empire at its height, Zoroastrianism. We still find a few 100,000 around today, primarily in India, where they're known as Parsis, P-A-R-S-I-S, Parsis. And it still does exist today, but for all intents and purposes, the Western religions today are comprised primarily of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which share histories and geographies and the God of Abraham. If we move to the other side of the slide here, we see the Eastern religions. Hinduism is by far the oldest of the Eastern religions, and in a sense Jainism and Buddhism are derived from or reactions to Hinduism, depending on how you look at them. India actually is responsible for 4 of these Eastern religions: Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, all originated in India. So actually India can lay claim to being the birthplace of 4 of the world's great religions. Taoism and Confucianism are both Chinese. They originated in China. And then finally, Shintoism originated in Japan. And the way the course is set up, we will move through the Eastern religions first. In fact, we're going to focus on Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Taoism primarily. And then we will move on to the Western religions, Judaism, followed by Christianity, and then Islam. In this next slide, I have a sort of historical timeline of sorts for you. And as you can see at the top, lots of question marks. Of course, the further back we go in history, the more difficult it is to obtain reliable information regarding what's going on. But it appears as though Hinduism is perhaps the oldest of the great religions. Please note, now, that does not mean Hinduism is the oldest religion. There are religions in sub-Saharan West Africa. There are Native American religions over here in North America that are far, far older than these religions. In fact, these tribal religions of Africa and Native America, it could be anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 years old. But nevertheless, of the great religions, Hinduism is probably the oldest. It began around 2000 BCE, best we can tell. By the way, BCE stands for Before Common Era, E-R-A. And CE stands for Common Era. It was decided some time ago by scholars and historians to drop the AD-BC nomenclature, since AD actually stands for Anno Domini, year of our Lord. In other words, it's a Christian standard. And so they've gone to something more culture neutral, and so we simply use CE to mark what used to be called AD, and BCE to mark what used to be called BC. Anyway, back to the chart. As best we can tell, there's no one particular founder of Hinduism, and you'll see why that's the case in our next module when we move into Hinduism. Judaism, if we use a biblical chronology, which actually, once you move past the time of Saul, David, and Solomon, the three kings of the united monarchy, most of you probably recognize King David. Once we move past that point, the history gets really muddled, and to be honest, we don't really know what was going on before that time. So Abraham may or may not have actually existed. Certainly he's a literary figure. And anyway, though, if we use biblical chronology, then that puts him back at about 1800 BCE. And Abraham, of course, was the one that was called out by God. He made a covenant with God. And so we begin the history of Judaism with the figure of Abraham, about 1800 BCE. The individual named Zoroaster existed sometime around 1500 BCE, although the religion itself could be older than that, and to be honest, our information regarding Zoroaster is not really good either, so that's just an estimate regarding when Zoroastrianism may have begun. This is a little puzzling, though, because actually Zoroastrianism had a great influence on Judaism and Hinduism. So it's quite possible at least some form of the religion that would come to be known as Zoroastrianism was around for a very long time, perhaps before Hinduism and Judaism. And then we move into religions that are a bit closer to our time. A lot more historical information is available on these religions. You can see we have the founders for the next four. Jainism, the founder, his name was Nataputta-Vardhamana. He's also known as Mahavira, which is a title meaning the great hero. And actually, Mahavira coexisted with Siddhartha Gautama, the person who would come to be known as the Buddha. He was a little bit older, but they were contemporaries. The founder of Taoism, the Chinese religion, is Lao Tzu. We don't really know if anyone called Lao Tzu actually existed, because actually the name means something like old boy. But nevertheless, he's the traditional founder, designated as a traditional founder of Taoism. And then you see Confucianism, Kung Fu Tzu, and that has been anglicized to Confucius, a name that some of you are probably familiar with. And then, of course, the sort of English or anglicized version of the religion for the name of the religion is Confucianism. Confucianism. Please note the spelling. And then moving a little bit closer to our time, Shintoism began around the 3rd century BCE. There's no founder that we know of. Christianity we mark at around the 1st century CE, although Jesus was probably born sometime around 6 to 4 BCE. Of course, he had to have been alive when King Herod was alive, and King Herod died in 4 BCE. So the birth of Christ is traced back to sometime around 6 to 4 BCE. And of course, we mark the beginnings of Christianity with the birth of Christ. Of course, I guess some may like to mark that a bit later, because actually there was no Christian church during the time that Jesus lived. In fact, there was no Christian church for quite a while after Jesus had died. But nevertheless, we can certainly mark the beginnings of Christianity with its recognized founder, and that would be Jesus. Islam, Muhammad is the founder there, and in 610 CE, he received his first revelation from Allah through the angel Gabriel. By 650, there was a written corpus of these revelations called the Quran, so we can safely mark the beginning of Islam back to the 7th century CE. And then finally, Sikhism is a revealed religion. The founder is Guru Nanak. Began in India sometime during the 15th century CE. Okay, well, that was a brief review of the world religions and a bit about their history. Just a few more words on the demography and geography of the great world religions. You have this fact sheet. It looks like this. So you may want to refer to it. First point I want to make has to do with the numbers of worshipers for these religions. The largest four religions, as you can see from your sheet there, are Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism in that order. Christianity, of course, is the largest religion in the world, comprising about 30% of the world's population. Islam comprises about 20% of the world's population. Islam, by the way, is the world's world's fastest growing religion. But this has nothing to do with missionary efforts or the inherent validity of the religion or anything like that. It's simply that the birth rate is higher in areas that embrace Islam. It's as simple as that. But it is the world's fastest growing religion for whatever reason. Hinduism comprises about 13% of the world's population, and finally Buddhism about 5% of the world's population. You can see that actually the third largest grouping here is something that I've titled secular / non-religious / atheistic / agnostic. These are people who simply are not religious in one way or another. And it comprises about 14% of the world's population, and it's a number that actually continues to grow. You see Judaism at the bottom there. I've included it because Judaism is so tiny. Even though it is very significant historically and culturally, and actually gives us the foundation of both Christianity and Islam, you can see that as far as size, it's listed as 0.2% of the world's population. So it is relatively tiny. Around 14 million people are considered Jews in the world today. Now, you will want to refer to a few pages inside your textbook, Living Religions. And, I guess about 10 pages in, you're going to find a map. And so you may want to have that in front of you as we discuss the geography of the world's religions. And you do have it in front of you, obviously. So, but there are a few things that I would like to point out to you. The way that Protestantism and Catholicism break down is kind of interesting. In the Western Hemisphere, you will find that Protestantism dominates in North America, whereas Catholicism dominates in South America. And what's interesting is that as you move over to Europe, you see Northern Europe comprised of Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the Netherlands. You could even include the United Kingdom and Ireland. If you put a big circle around Northern Europe, that would be considered Protestant. And then, of course, as you move to Southern Europe, Italy, France, Spain, etc., put a big circle around that, and you have Catholic Europe. So again, sort of a North-South Protestant Catholic breakdown, just like you find in North America. Please note also, too, that Australia is Christian, primarily Roman Catholic, and also lots of Protestants there as well. You also find Christianity in the southern part of Africa, below below the Sahara, in what we call sub-Saharan Africa. you find that there is a smattering of Christianity here and there. And then finally, please note that you see this large purple area that's labeled Russian Federation. That area there is primarily comprised of Eastern Orthodox worshipers, which is the third sect of Christianity. There are three sects in Christianity: Protestantism, Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodox. You primarily find the Eastern Orthodox in this purple area marked Russian Federation. Islam is right in the middle of the page. Really easy to see. It sort of sticks out. All of that yellow area there is Islam. Right in the middle of the two pages there, Northern Africa, moving on into the Middle East and Central Asia. That's the sort of traditional area of Islam. And then you will note, however, to the right, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. Islam spread to this area a bit later. And actually, Indonesia is the most populous, well, I should say, Indonesia actually possesses more Muslims than any other country. So it is the most populous Muslim nation. Number 2 behind Indonesia is actually India. So as it turns out, there are way more Muslims who are Asian than anything else. So most Muslims, in fact, are Asian. A very small minority are actually Arab. You see Hinduism, the pink there, located in and around India. As I've mentioned earlier, it's pretty much stayed put in that area. China, you see that gray area there, and actually China is the birthplace, of course, of Taoism and Confucianism, but many people in China will worship Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and even some traditional Chinese religions. It's really hard to get a count on what's going on in China, actually. If you draw a big circle around Mongolia, China, Southeast Asia, where you see Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and also catch Japan and the Koreas, well, that basically is the Buddhist world. Pretty much most of Eastern Asia, certainly Southeastern Asia, is Buddhist. Of course, Shintoism is located in Japan. And you also will note that there are quite a few areas where you find indigenous religions, the areas in blue. The northern extent of North America, a little piece of South America, Australia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and those areas up above Mongolia, Papua New Guinea. You find indigenous religions in these areas. These are ancient, very cultural, tribal-based religions that have been in these places for many, many, many thousands of years. And they don't properly fall under the purview of great or world religions, but they are covered here in other courses. I teach a course in the anthropology of religion where tribal religions are discussed. Okay, so that does it for the instructor-produced videos for Module 1.